I found out that the Sunny Pines HOA was constructing 96 upscale homes on the farmland I had inherited. But everything changed the moment I uncovered my grandfather's original property surveys, and the entire development suddenly became legally mine. You should have seen the stunned expressions on their faces when I exposed the truth during their own community meeting. I never imagined I'd have to defend land that had already been passed down to me. After Grandpa Joe passed away, I became the owner of his 200-acre farm near Meadowcreek. The land had been in our family for generations. I lived far from there, tied up in a demanding city job, and didn't visit nearly as much as I should have. One morning, I got a call from Mrs. Thompson, Grandpa's neighbor for over 4 decades. Her voice trembled with frustration as she said, "They're building houses on your land. Big yellow machines started digging just yesterday. You need to come right away." At first, I thought maybe a construction crew had mistakenly crossed the property line, but Mrs. Thompson wasn't the type to overreact. She continued, "Sunny Pines put up signs all over. They're planning nearly 100 homes where your East Fields used to be." I packed a suitcase, got in my car, and drove straight to Meadowcreek. The drive was a blur. When I finally turned onto the dirt road leading to Grandpa's farmhouse, everything felt different. The peaceful rural landscape was disrupted by the noise of machinery. As I came over the hill that overlooked the eastern fields, my heart dropped. Heavy equipment was tearing into the soil where Grandpa once grew corn and soybeans. Workers and safety gear were scattered across the area, marking the ground with orange spray paint. A massive sign near the entrance read, "Future home of Sunny Pines East, a 96 luxury homes starting at $450,000. I got out of the car and approached a woman who was clearly in charge. She wore spotless beige pants and a crisp white blouse, her hair immaculate despite the dust. She held a clipboard and was finishing a call. "Excuse me," I said once she hung up. "What exactly is going on here?" She looked me over like I was wasting her time. "We're preparing this land for residential development," she replied in a smooth, rehearsed tone. "Diane Reynolds, president of the Sunny Pines Homeowners Association." She offered a cold handshake. I didn't take it. "This land belongs to me," I said. "My grandfather, Joe Miller, owned this farm until he passed recently, and I inherited it." Her smile was polite, but it didn't reach her eyes. "There must be a mix-up. Sunny Pines Development purchased this parcel last year. All the permits and approvals are in place." "That's not possible. My grandfather would never have sold this land." "Maybe he didn't mention it to you," she replied, almost sounding sympathetic. "The sale went through 9 months ago. We've been planning this project for quite some time." I felt my pulse quicken. Grandpa had been ill, but mentally sharp until the end. He never would have sold his land without saying something. Something didn't add up. "I want to see the documents," I told her firmly. "You can speak with our legal department." She handed me a business card. "But everything is perfectly legitimate. Now, if you'll excuse me, we have a timeline to meet." She turned away, already placing another call. I stood frozen as machines continued tearing up the soil that had sustained my family for generations. Back at the farmhouse, Mrs. Thompson waited on the porch with a pitcher of iced tea and a worried look. "They started showing up with measuring tools a few months ago," she told me. "Your grandpa was furious. Kept saying they had no right, that they were trying to steal what wasn't theirs." "Did he ever say anything about selling?" I asked. "Never. He always said this land would stay in the family. Always." Her eyes welled with emotion. "The day before he went to the hospital, he was searching through his office. Said he had to find something important, something to protect the farm." Grandpa's office had remained untouched since his passing. I hadn't had the strength to go through his things during my short visit for the funeral. But now, I needed to dig deeper. The room still smelled like pipe smoke and old books. Shelves were packed with almanacs, photo albums, and decades worth of records. Grandpa had documented everything: a rainfall, crop yields, equipment repairs, all in his careful handwriting. I figured the filing cabinet would be the most likely place to start. Inside were neatly labeled folders, organized by year, but there was nothing about land sales or Sunny Pines. I spent hours poring over faded pages under the warm glow of a desk lamp. Just when I was ready to give up, I noticed a loose floorboard under the desk. Pressing it with my foot, It shifted slightly. I knelt down and used a letter opener to pry it up. Beneath it was a small metal box. A key dangled from a nail on the underside of the desk. Inside the box, I found the farm's original deed, Grandpa's will naming me as the sole heir, several aged survey maps and a letter, handwritten and addressed to me. "If you're reading this," it began, "then someone's trying to take what's ours." My hands trembled as I read. Grandpa explained that developers had long been trying to get their hands on the land. He'd always refused to sell, but in his final months, someone from Sunny Pines kept coming around, asking him to sign paperwork under the guise of a simple road easement, different documents each time. "I never signed away my land," Grandpa wrote. "If they claim I did, they're lying. Look at the original 1910 survey and compare it to the current county records. The truth lies in the boundaries." Digging further into the box, I uncovered a broken bar. I found the original survey tucked beneath layers of old paperwork. It revealed something shocking. The true property lines extended far beyond what I thought. According to this document, Grandpa's land wasn't 200 acres. It was nearly 280. I couldn't sleep that night. I spread everything out on the kitchen table and compared Grandpa's old survey with the most recent county maps. Somewhere over the decades, the eastern boundary had quietly shifted, cutting out a massive portion of land. And it wasn't just the area under construction. If this original survey was accurate, Sunny Pines had already built part of their development, including homes and a clubhouse on land that still legally belonged to us. At first light, I knew what I had to do. I needed a lawyer, and fast. And I needed to find out exactly what Diane Reynolds and her hoe had been scheming. They thought they were dealing with a grieving, clueless heir, but they were about to discover that Grandpa had left behind more than memories. He'd left me a map, a plan, and now a broken bar, a mission. I folded Grandpa's letter and slipped it into my pocket. "I won't let you down," I whispered to the empty room. By 8 a.m., I was sitting in the small reception area of Walter Franklin, the only property attorney in Meadowcreek. His secretary raised an eyebrow when I asked for an emergency consult, but she managed to get me in before lunch. "So, you believe Sunny Pines is building on land that still belongs to your family?" Walter asked after I explained. He was older, with thick glasses and a bow tie that made him look like he'd stepped out of a law textbook. I laid out the papers on his desk, original surveys from 1910 and an update from 1978, and pointed to the discrepancies. Walter studied the maps carefully, tracing his finger along the old boundary lines, his brows furrowed deeper with each page. "This is very unusual," he murmured. "According to these documents, your property extends nearly half a mile further east than what's on file with the county now." He looked up. "That includes the construction site, a broken bar, and it looks like also the Sunny Pines clubhouse and about 20 houses built several years ago." 5 years ago, I added grimly. Walter removed his glasses and rubbed his temples. "A boundary dispute like this isn't simple," he said. "We need to find out when the change occurred and how it got into the records." He called the county assessor's office and put the conversation on speaker. After being transferred through several departments, we found the smoking gun. A 1984 record showed a minor 10-foot utility easement added. But then, in 1997, a much larger shift appeared, an 80-acre reduction to the official property. The only documentation was a vague form with a scribbled signature. I checked the date. My grandfather was in the hospital then. Triple bypass. He couldn't have signed this. Walter's face went rigid. "Then that signature is a forgery. That would make this fraud. What do? "We file an emergency injunction to stop all construction immediately," he said. "Then we petition the court to recognize the original boundaries. We'll also need a certified surveyor to verify your grandfather's maps." As Walter began preparing the legal filing, I headed to the county records office. If this was going to court, I needed more ammo. Hours later, buried deep in the public archives section of the local library, I struck gold. Sunny Pines wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a corporate maze. A tangled web of LLCs and holding companies kept the paper trail deliberately confusing. But the same names showed up again and again: Diane Reynolds, her husband Thomas Reynolds, County Commissioner James Harris, Planning Board Director Mark Wilson, and 2 others I didn't recognize. Then I found the document that made my blood run cold. A loan approval dated just 3 months ago. A $16 million line of credit for Sunny Pines HOA with the land listed as collateral. My land. I snapped photos of every page and drove straight to the office of the Meadowcreek Gazette. Tanya Williams, the editor, had known Grandpa for decades. When I told her I suspected fraud involving prominent officials, her eyes lit up with interest. "I can't print accusations without proof," she said. "But I'll start digging into the approval process for Sunny Pines East." It did seem unusually fast. Back at the farmhouse, I found Mrs. Thompson chatting with another elderly neighbor, Mr. Grayson. When I brought up Diane Reynolds, his expression darkened. "She's the reason I sold my place," he said bitterly. "They fined me every week over my tomato garden, said it wasn't HOA approved. Then my workshop violated some new rule they made up. I couldn't keep up. Eventually, I just gave up." "How many others went through this?" I asked. "At least a dozen of us," he said. "All sold for less than market value. Always to one of those shell companies tied to Sunny Pines." A pattern was forming. Target holder landowners, overwhelm them with fines and red tape, buy their land cheap, then develop it and rake in millions. My grandfather had been their next target, but unlike the others, he saw the trap coming, and he left me the tools to spring it. My phone rang. It was Walter. "The judge granted our emergency injunction," he said. "All construction must stop immediately. We have a hearing next week. But brace yourself if this is going to get ugly." "Brace yourself," Walter warned. "This is going to get ugly." I thanked him and hung up, a flicker of victory burning in my chest. Court order in hand, I drove straight to the construction site. Workers were packing up for the day, but one vehicle remained. Diane Reynolds' sleek black SUV. She stepped out as I approached, phone pressed to her ear like always. Her expression tightened when she saw me. "Construction stops now," I said, handing her the court injunction. "The legal boundaries are under dispute." She scanned the document. For the first time, I saw a crack in her polished Section 8. "This is absurd," she snapped. "We have every approval we need." "All based on fraudulent boundaries," I replied. "I have the original surveys." A flicker of doubt crossed her eyes, gone in a flash, replaced by icy resolve. "This little stunt is going to cost you," she said in a low voice. "You have no idea who you are dealing with." "Actually," I said, stepping closer, "I do. 6 names tied to dozens of LLCs, $16 million in loans using stolen land as collateral. County officials greenlighting projects they secretly profit from." I hadn't planned to reveal just how much I knew, but the look on her face made it worth it. Her grip on the phone tightened until her knuckles went pale. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "We could be reasonable. Maybe you'd consider a generous offer for 7 figures. Immediate payment." "Not interested." Her smile returned, sharp and confident. "Everyone has a price." "Not for this." "You don't even live here," she said, trying again. "What do you care about some old dirt?" I turned away. "This old dirt's been in my family for 4 generations. It's not for sale." As I walked to my car, her voice followed me. "Commissioner Harris is my husband's golf partner. Judge Evans has dinner at our house. You think your injunction will hold? You're nobody here." She wasn't wrong. I was an outsider now, but she forgot one thing. Grandpa wasn't. He lived in Meadowcreek his whole life. He knew everyone, and he left me more than just land. Back at the farmhouse, I returned to his office, a place I hadn't fully explored. If Grandpa had seen this coming, what else had he prepared? I dug deeper in folders, notebooks, drawers. In an old album labeled Community Picnic 2018, I found dozens of photos, Grandpa smiling with neighbors, local shop owners, families who'd known him for decades. Names were handwritten on the back of each one. These weren't just memories, they were allies. My phone buzzed. From Sunny Pines HOA compliance. Subject: parking violation. Fine, $500. Attached was a photo of my car parked at Grandpa's farm on my land. The harassment had started, but I wasn't like the others. I knew their playbook now, and I had something they didn't expect: Grandpa's secret weapon, still buried in his files. As night fell over the quiet fields, I sat on the porch where Grandpa once told me stories in the summer. The equipment in the eastern field sat idle under the weight of the court order, but I knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, Diane would rally her allies, The real fight was about to begin, but what she didn't know was that in Grandpa's secret box, I'd found more than old maps. I'd found documents that not only questioned the boundary changes but revealed exactly who falsified them, when, and why. She thought she was facing a sentimental grandchild clinging to a patch of dirt. What she didn't know was that my grandfather had spent years preparing for Thesa, meticulously gathering evidence while they dismissed him as a stubborn old man. The trap was set. All I had to do now was let them walk into it. Later that night, I stood outside the Sunny Pines Community Center, heart pounding. This was the night I'd been preparing for. Inside, the room buzzed with energy. Nearly 100 residents filled rows of folding chairs, sipping punch and chatting excitedly about tennis courts and luxury upgrades. At the front, Diane stood in a bright red blazer, gesturing toward glossy images of massive houses on a projection screen. "Picture it," she said, beaming. "A pool with a waterfall, modern amenities, increased property value." A broken bar. The room applauded. They had no idea what I carried in my folder. I walked down the center aisle and raised my voice. "Excuse me, I need to speak about this development." Heads turned. Diane's smile faltered, then returned, tighter than before. "We'll take questions after the presentation," she said. "This can't wait." I stepped onto the small stage, facing the crowd. "My name is Alex Morgan. My grandfather owned Willow Creek Farm for over 60 years. The old property we purchased," Diane cut in smoothly. "We're grateful to finally develop that eyesore." A few murmurs rippled through the room. I opened my folder. "This," I said, holding up a yellowed document, "is the original 1910 land survey." And Thesa held up another. "A is the 1978 update. According to both, our family's land extends 80 acres farther east than what's currently shown in county records." I walked to the HOA board, placing copies in front of each member. "You're not just building on disputed land," I continued. "You've built on it. 20 homes and your clubhouse sit on property that legally belongs to me." The room erupted. Voices shouted. A chair scraped loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous," Diane shouted, but her voice barely rose above the chaos. And I wasn't done. Diane grabbed one of the surveys, her face flushed. "We have permits. We've sold lots. Construction has already started." I stayed calm as her voice rose. "Your permits were issued based on incorrect property lines. I've already filed court papers to halt all construction." Gerald Fisra, the HOA treasurer, a balding man with thick glasses, leaned in to examine the documents, his face growing pale. "Diane," he said loudly enough for the mic to catch, "these boundary markers line up with the old creek bed. They look legitimate." She snatched the papers from his hands, furious. "This is a scam, a setup. He's just trying to squeeze money out of us." "You're welcome to believe that," I replied, pulling out one last document. "But there's something else you should know." I paused, letting the silence grow thick. "According to these boundaries, Diana, your personal home sits entirely on land that legally belongs to me." The room fell dead silent. Dozens of people exchanged stunned glances. It hit them if the documents were correct. Some of them didn't legally own the land beneath their homes. A man in the back stood up, his voice shaking. "Are you saying we might lose our houses?" Before I could answer, Diane slammed her hand down on the podium. "This meeting is over. Everyone out. The board needs to discuss this privately." As the crowd dispersed in anxious murmurs, a young woman gently touched my arm. "I'm Rachel Winters," she said. "I just used my life savings to buy a lot in the new section." "What happens now?" I hadn't expected the human side of this to hit me so directly. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," I told her sincerely. "This is about fixing something that was stolen. I just want the truth to matter." Before she could respond, Diane appeared beside us, seething. "Don't listen to him," she snapped. Once everyone else had cleared the room, she leaned in close, her voice low and venomous. "You have no idea who you're up against. I built Sunny Pines from nothing. No one takes it from me." She stormed out, heels clicking on the polished floor. Through the windows, I saw worried homeowners clustering in the parking lot. My phone buzzed. "A message from Mr. Wallace. How did it go?" I replied. "They know. Get ready for their next move." What I didn't tell him was how unsteady I felt. I'd lit the fusee, but was I truly ready for what came next? These weren't just lines on a survey. They were people's homes and dreams. But those dreams had been built on stolen soil. And Diane Reynolds wouldn't go down quietly. Later that night, I awoke to the sound of engines outside. Bright lights streamed through the farmhouse windows. I stumbled out to the porch to find 3 white SUVs lined up across my driveway. Sunny Pines security was stenciled on the doors. Men in uniforms stood beside them. One stepped forward and handed me a thick envelope. "Cease and desist from the Sunny Pines HOA," he said bluntly. "You are ordered to withdraw all claims against the development or face legal action." I tore it open. Inside was a letter accusing me of fraud, claiming my documents were fake, and demanding I pay for damages to the community's reputation. "You can't be serious," I said. The man shrugged, just delivering the message. "Have a nice day." He returned to his vehicle, but none of them left. In the morning, I discovered concrete blocks had been placed across the end of my driveway during the night. I flagged down one of the guards. "You can't block access to my property." He didn't even meet my eyes. "This access point hasn't been approved by the development committee. It's closed." Safety reasons. I was trapped on my own land. I called the sheriff's department. They told me it was a civil matter and suggested I get a lawyer. Then my phone rang. Diane's name lit up the screen. I hadn't given her my number. "Good morning," she said sweetly. "Enjoying the view?" "This is harassment," I snapped. "You can't block my driveway." "Actually," she purred, "according to county records of the real loan as if that drive crosses Sunny Pines common ground, we're within our rights to limit access." "You know those records are falsified." She laughed. "Let me explain how this works. The county commissioner golfs with my husband. The building inspector's daughter works for my real estate office. The water department supervisor lives in Sunny Pines." I felt my stomach sink. "By this time tomorrow," she continued, "your farmhouse will have 15 code violations. The water might get shut off due to maintenance. And good luck getting a local contractor. None of them will touch your place. They know better." "That's illegal," I said. "That's small-town politics," she replied. "You can't win." "But I'm reasonable." "Drop the claim. Sign over the disputed acres. This all goes away. I'll even throw in a nice check for your trouble." "It's not about money." "It always is. Think it over. You've got until tomorrow." She hung up. I stared at the screen, then at the security SUV still idling outside. They weren't going anywhere. By late afternoon, a county inspector arrived. He examined everything: wiring, plumbing, porch railings. He handed me a thick list of violations and said they'd all need immediate fixing, at great cost. Minutes after he left, another truck rolled up. Workers began installing signs along my fence. "Future home of Sunny Pines East A Luxury Estates." The new signs read, "Future homes coming soon." Meanwhile, my water pressure dropped to a barely noticeable trickle. When I called the utility company, they blamed maintenance work and no estimate on when it would be fixed. Ordering dinner became impossible. The pizza delivery driver called to say he couldn't find my address, something that had never been a problem before. Step by step, I was being cut off. That night, I sat on the porch in darkness, watching security lights sweep across the fields where my grandfather once grew corn. The bulldozers sat idle in the distance, waiting to continue erasing his legacy. My phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Wallace. "They've filed a countersuit, claiming your documents are forged. Court date set in 3 months. They'll keep building in the meantime." 3 months. By then, those houses would be half finished. The damage would be done. I scrolled through my contacts, desperate for help. One name caught my eye: Janet Rivera, a reporter for the local paper. We'd gone to high school together, but hadn't spoken in years. Maybe she could help. As I debated calling her, headlights appeared down the long driveway. A car carefully maneuvered around the concrete barriers and pulled up to the house. My heart raced, expecting another of Diane's intimidations. But the door opened and out stepped Gerald Fisher, the HOA treasurer who'd studied my documents at the meeting. "I shouldn't be here," he whispered nervously, glancing toward the security vehicles still parked nearby. "Why?" I asked. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Because what Diane's doing isn't right. I've been keeping the HOA books for 7 years. There are things you need to see. I invited him inside, away from prying eyes. At my kitchen table, he opened his laptop and revealed a trove of financial records, emails, and meeting minutes. Diane and the board have been treating HOA funds like their personal bank, he explained. Special fees that vanish, contracts awarded to family members, reserve funds invested in businesses owned by the board. Why show me this? I asked. Because I'm not the only homeowner fed up with her rules and control, Gerald said quietly. When you showed up with those property documents, it was the first time I've seen Diane scared. He pointed to a spreadsheet. Look at last year's special assessments. Every homeowner paid $2,000 for road repairs. The actual work cost half that. The rest disappeared. That's theft, I said. Gerald nodded grimly. There's more. Those 20 homes on your land? The residents have been complaining about drainage problems for years. Diane promises fixes, but nothing happens. Now we know why. As we talked, my phone buzzed with messages from unknown numbers. We support you against Diana the Millers, 42 Sunny Pine Lane. She fined us $500 for planting vegetables instead of flowers. Can we help? A Jackson family. Our children's playground equipment was removed without notice. We want to join your fight. The Rodriguezes. Gerald smiled faintly. I might have shared your number with a few friends. For the first time since this began, I felt hope. Diane had power, money, and connections, but she also had enemies. Many of them. We need a plan, I said, and I think I know where to start. Gerald left, carefully driving past the security vehicles. Outside, a light rain began to fall over the half-built houses in the distance. Diane thought she was breaking me. Instead, she was helping me find the allies I needed to win. Tomorrow would be different. My grandfather used to say, the best trap isn't one your enemy falls into, it's one they build themselves. Without knowing it, Diane just handed me the final pieces. The next morning, my water was shut off. By midday, the electricity followed. I stood in my grandfather's kitchen, staring at spoiled food in the warm fridge. Diane Reynolds thought she could bully me off my land by making life unbearable. She had another thing coming. I grabbed my notebook and headed out. If Diane wanted war, I needed allies. The first door I knocked on was Mrs. Thompson's. She opened, wearing a flowered housecoat. They shut off your utilities? That's illegal. She gasped. So is building on my land, I said. But Diane has friends at the county office. I need to know who else hates the HOA as much as we do. Her eyes lit up. Oh honey, grab a chair. This might take a while. She gave me 15 names as a family's fined for the wrong mailbox color. Elderly couples threatened with liens for having grandchildren visit too often. A single mom who couldn't pay a $900 fee for a tiny fence to keep her toddler safe. I spent the entire day knocking doors across Sunny Pines. At first, people were scared to talk, but when I showed them my property documents, something shifted. The hope replaced fear. Sarah Jenkins, whose garden had been ripped out by HOA order, invited me in for lemonade. Diane made my husband dig up our tomato plants, she said, hands trembling with anger. She said vegetables aren't aesthetically pleasing. We got fined $500. Mrs. Thompson's hands shook as she told me about her struggles. My husband works 2 jobs already, she said. The Patel family had spent $3,000 fighting the HOA over their porch swing. The Johnsons weren't allowed to paint their front door any color but beige with white trim. Every house looked exactly the same. It's not just the rules, Trevor Martinez explained, while his wife Maria nodded in agreement. It's how they enforce them. Diane drives around, taking pictures of violations. Some people get warnings, others get instant fines. There's no fairness. By sunset, I had spoken to 27 families all with similar stories, all terrified of Diane Reynolds. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Wallace, my attorney. Can we legally form a competing homeowners association on your land? Absolutely, he replied. But what about the existing homes? That's where it gets interesting, I said. I'm going to need the community center for a meeting tomorrow night. Mr. Wallace laughed. They'll never let you use it. They don't own it, I said. I do, according to my property lines. Remember? The next day, I printed 200 flyers. Emergency community meeting. Your home may be at risk. I included copies of the original property survey. As darkness fell, the community center filled beyond capacity. 97 families showed up. People stood against the walls when the chairs ran out. Diane arrived last, pushing through the crowd, her face twisted with rage. This meeting is unauthorized. Everyone needs to leave immediately. Sarah Jenkins stood up. Or what? More fines? Haven't you taken enough from us already? The room erupted in applause. I stepped to the front, raising my hands for quiet. I didn't come here to cause trouble. I began. I came because my grandfather's land was stolen. But after meeting all of you, I realize I'm not the only victim. For the next hour, residents shared stories of HOA abuse. Tears flowed. Voices shook with emotion. Diane sat stiffly at the back, tapping furiously on her phone. Here's what I propose, I said once everyone had spoken. We form the Meadowcreek Homeowners Coalition. Together, we negotiate new property lines fair to everyone. We create a new community agreement with reasonable rules and transparent finances. You can't do that, Diane shouted. These homes are bound by contract to Sunny Pines HOA. I held up the original land survey. Contracts based on fraudulent property ownership aren't valid, Ms. Reynolds. But I'm not here to take anyone's home. I'm here to fix what's broken. The vote was nearly unanimous. 89 families joined the coalition on the spot. As people filed out energized and hopeful, Gerald Jenkins, the HOA treasurer, approached me privately. There's something you should know, he whispered, glancing nervously at Diane across the room. The HOA finances a broken bar. They don't add up. Monthly dues keep rising, but our reserves are shrinking. I've tried to look into it, but Diane controls all the accounts. I patted his shoulder. Would you be willing to show me the books? He nodded. Tomorrow morning, my office. Diane stormed over, pointing a finger in my face. You've made a terrible mistake. By this time tomorrow, you'll regret ever coming to Meadowcreek. Is that a threat, Miss Reynolds? It's a promise. I have the county commissioner, the police chief, and the local judge on speed dial. This little rebellion ends now. What she didn't know was that I'd invited a reporter from the Meadowcreek Gazette to sit quietly in the back of the meeting. Every word had been recorded, every threat documented. As Diane slammed the door behind her, my phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Wallace. Environmental survey results came in. You won't believe what's on that land. I smiled. Diane thought she had all the power, but Grandpa always said, the truth is the most powerful weapon of all. Tomorrow, the truth about Sunny Pines HOA would be front-page news. I woke up to police cars surrounding my grandfather's farmhouse. Through the window, I spotted Diane Reynolds standing next to a tall man in uniform. Time to face the music, the police chief announced. As I opened the door, I smiled calmly. Actually, Chief Williams, I believe you'll find I'm the legal property owner. I handed him a folder containing the original land surveys and my grandfather's deed. These documents haven't been verified, Diane snapped. They have, said a woman stepping forward from a car I hadn't noticed before. Caroline Mitchell, County Records Office. We pulled the original surveys last night after receiving some concerning reports. Diane's face went pale. What reports? I asked, gesturing toward the farmhouse. Perhaps we should discuss this inside. Coffee's ready, Carolyn said. 15 minutes later, my kitchen table held an unexpected gathering. The police chief, the county records clerk, Mr. Wallace, and Diane, whose perfect makeup couldn't hide her growing panic. The original property lines had been improperly recorded back in 1973. Carolyn spread maps across the table, pointing as she explained. This entire area including the existing Sunny Pines homes and the new construction legally belongs to the Richards estate. The police chief whistled in surprise. That's quite a mistake. Not a mistake, Mr. Wallace said quietly. We have evidence suggesting the boundary change was deliberate. Ridiculously, Diane slammed her hand on the table. This is a scam to extort money from hard-working homeowners. Speaking of money, I said, sliding a folder toward the police chief. Gerald Jenkins provided these financial records yesterday. 3 years of Sunny Pines HOA accounts. As the chief flipped through the pages, his expression darkened. Ms. Reynolds, he asked, Can you explain why $427,000 in homeowner dues was transferred to Sunshine Consulting LLC? That's our legitimate management company, Diane replied stiffly. Registered to your son-in-law, I added, along with 4 other companies charging the HOA for services: landscaping, security, maintenance, legal counsel, all owned by your family members. The chief closed the folder. Ms. Reynolds, we're going to need you to come down to the station. This is absurd. Do you know who I am? My husband plays golf with Judge Harrington every Sunday. Diane protested as the chief led her away. Carolyn turned to me quietly. What happens now? Those people's homes? I have no intention of evicting anyone, I assured her, but the development has to stop until we can properly survey the wetlands. By afternoon, construction was halted. Local news vans lined the streets outside the farmhouse. My phone buzzed non-stop with calls from worried homeowners. That evening, I called an emergency town hall meeting at the local high school auditorium, at the only space big enough. Nearly 400 people packed the room: existing homeowners, construction workers now out of jobs, county officials, and curious locals. Fear and anger hung thick in the air. I took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone. My name is Richards. This was my grandfather's land. I didn't come here looking for trouble. I came to honor his legacy. Shouts interrupted me. What about our homes? We'll sue. My life savings is tied up in that house. I raised my hands. Please, I'm not here to take anything from you. In fact, I want to offer a solution that benefits everyone. The room quieted a bit, so I continued. First, all existing homeowners will receive proper legal deeds to their property. No one will lose their home. Murmurs of relief spread through the crowd. Second, the new development will be redesigned to protect the wetlands my grandfather cherished. These aren't just swamps, they're critical habitats and natural flood protection for the entire area. I clicked to the next slide, showing my grandfather's environmental studies. These wetlands are home to 3 endangered species. Building on them isn't just wrong, it's illegal under federal law. A man stood up. I put my life savings into a lot in the new section. What happens to my investment? Fair question, I said. We're establishing a property exchange program. Anyone who purchased in the protected area can swap for an equivalent lot in the redesigned development. No one loses their investment. For the next hour, I laid out my vision: a community balancing homes with nature, transparent governance, reasonable rules, and fair fees that actually go toward community improvements. Toward the end, Sarah Jenkins took the microphone. I've lived under Diane's rules for 8 years, she said. I couldn't paint my door blue. I couldn't grow tomatoes. My kids couldn't play outside after 7 p.m. because of the noise ordinance. She looked around the room. Is that really the community we want? By the time the meeting ended, over 300 people had signed in support of the new Meadowcreek Community Association. Even some of Diane's former allies joined, including Gerald, who agreed to help untangle the financial mess. The next 6 months were tough. Diane hired expensive lawyers who tried every trick to overturn our claims, but the evidence was overwhelming. Eventually, she accepted a plea deal on financial fraud charges. Today, 1 year later, I'm sitting on my grandfather's porch, watching kids ride bikes past houses with doors painted every color of the rainbow. The community garden where Sarah's tomatoes grow tall buzzes with neighbors sharing gardening tips. Behind me, Grandpa's farmhouse has been transformed into our community center. Classes, meetings, and celebrations happen here daily. The wetlands are protected by a conservation easement, with walking trails and educational signs explaining the importance of each plant and animal. Mrs. Thompson joins me on the porch, handing me lemonade. Your grandfather would be bursting with pride, she says, pointing toward the redesigned development where construction has finally resumed. Smaller homes, more green space, solar panels on every roof. I found something while cleaning out his study, I tell her, pulling out a faded notebook. It's Grandpa's journal from 30 years ago. He fought the original developers back when they first tried to build on the wetlands. Mrs. Thompson smiles. He always said you were just like him, stubborn as a mule when fighting for what's right. In the distance, a blue heron rises from the protected marsh, soaring above homes where people now live in harmony with the land. Sometimes, The best rap isn't about catching someone doing wrong, it's about showing them a better way to do right. Diane's hoe tried to steal my land, but instead, they gave me something far more valuable.